All right, what's up? Before we get started, if you're watching this on Twitter or YouTube, this is a clip from a live stream on Rumble. So if you want to watch the live stream and interact in the live chat, follow me on Rumble. It's Otis5D. And if you like the videos, the best thing you can do to help me is reply with a timestamp of the parts you like so that I can clip it for short form. And other than that, let's get going. This is Thoughts from 5D. Tonight's Thoughts from 5D is called Why Do I Talk About Jews So Much? And this is Thoughts from 5D. All right. I don't really have like a script for this, just FYI. Like I have like a vague idea, but this could be a kind of convoluted, jumbled video because there's a lot, right? There's a lot here. But I will say this. The number one reason that I talk about Jews so much is that the number one aspect of the people who talk about the Jews, whether that's Kanye or Nick Fuentes or Candace Owens or Kim.com or Andrew Tate or Dan Bilzerian or Sam Parker, Lucas Gage, Ian Malcolm, Joel Davis, etc. The number one thing I agree with those people on is that it seems very obvious to me, I'm not saying it's the truth, but it seems very obvious to me that the number one group that you're not allowed to talk about are the Jews. And you can say the Jews or the Zionists or Israel or whatever. I like to say the Jews because it's just like, let's just go all the way, right? Let's just go all the way. And then we can get into the nuance of that later. So the number one thing that I agree with is that this is the group you're not allowed to criticize. And why is that important to me? The reason that's important to me is that I feel like this issue of anti-Semitism, which is already illegal to, for instance, deny the Holocaust in many European countries, is going to be used as a wedge issue to censor free speech, period. And that something like the red terror of communism will descend upon the West. And through groups like the ADL and Media Matters, they will create a narrative that there is an unprecedented rise in anti-Semitism, and that desperate times call for desperate measures, and that we must create, like, they won't use the word loophole. We must create we must have a more nuanced view of free speech. So they'll say something like that. We need to have a more nuanced view, and we need to balance public safety with the rights of people to express themselves. And what they will subtly be doing is attempting to criminalize anti-Semitism. And of course, in addition to the fact that that's completely un-American, the issue is that now whoever gets to define what anti-Semitism is effectively gets to control, like, whether you are allowed on the internet or like to not be in prison, etc., or to have a bank account, all of the ways that one can be deplatformed from voice to livelihood to actual physical freedom. And so because of this, I feel like this needs to be talked about. I feel extremely certain about that. There are very few things I feel certain about, but this is one of them. And part of the reason for that is, I'll give you an example. I had a conversation very recently about the September 11th attacks and the idea that Israel was behind those attacks. And a person who is extremely skeptical, very smart person who is extremely skeptical of the fact that, you know, Israel was involved or that it was a false flag or anything like that, said, well, then why did Al-Qaeda like claim responsibility for it? Because obviously they don't like Israel and they don't like the Jews. So this would have been a perfect opportunity for them to say, we didn't do this. You know, the Jews did this. Israel did this. And I don't have a good response for that, is the truth, you know? And that's what I think is great, because let's just say that the truth is that the world of like nefariousness is extremely multipolar. You have all these bad actors that are ethnically Jewish, and you have all these bad actors that are WASPs, and you have all these bad actors that are Chinese and Russian and Middle Eastern and so on, right? Maybe that's the truth. You know, that seems very plausible, at least. And but because in my experience, there are no ramifications for people who talk about Middle Easterners or Chinese or Russians or WASPs, but there are large ramifications through my lens for people who talk about Jews. It lends itself to like a kind of deductive reasoning. Well, then that like... It's very simple. It's like, is it Voltaire, you know, or I can't remember, or is it George Orwell? I don't know. Whoever, you know, to see who you can't, to see who rules over you, just look at who you can't criticize, right? So by that very simple heuristic, which is very famous, it's a very famous heuristic, it's very easy to just say, oh, well, like clearly the group you can't talk about is the Jews. And like if you have college protests, the woke people are like all on your side, and they're like, you know, discrimination until you start protesting against Israel, and then they shut down your protest real fast, and they go against their whole liberation ideology and like standing with the brown people, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, there's a lot of basic logic which would say, okay, like the Jews run everything, or the Zionists or Israel. I use those three interchangeably. If you don't like that, that's your business, and maybe you're right and maybe I'm wrong, but just so you know, I use those three things interchangeably. And I know that technically they're absolutely not interchangeable, okay? I get it, but not enough to change at this point. So that's really it, is that what I care about is two things. I care about maintaining free speech, and so I want to just add my name, even if it's like wasted effort, in talking about these subjects, because I think that if there is a chilling effect and people do not talk about this, there is absolutely a very real possibility that we will lose free speech on the internet altogether. And I just don't want to live in that world. I cannot live with myself if I just quietly acquiesce to losing free speech on the internet. And so to me, the number one wedge issue that will be used is anti-Semitism. So it's like, okay, let's talk about it. The second reason is that because these conversations are considered so beyond the pale that like you get ostracized in theory, at least, for even, you know, breaching the subject. I have found that by breaching the subject, you know, people are horrified, but at the same time, some very smart people push back, and they have good pushbacks, and it gives me pause, and it's like, okay, well, what is going on in the world? Who are the power factions in the world? Because there are a lot of people, in my mind, making very good cases that Israel, like the United States is a puppet state of Israel, and that the reason Trump is coming into power now is because the Jewish elite, like people like Bill Ackman and the venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, many / most of whom are Jewish, turned on the Democrats, who they had a lifelong allegiance to, over the Gaza protests at the Ivy League universities, and they realized that the left was now signaling against Israel and vaguely anti-Semitic. And so they aligned with the Republicans, who up until that point they had claimed to hate, and who they are Nazis and so on, and white supremacists, as something like either the lesser of two evils or just the more pragmatic choice. But that it's very, there's a lot of evidence, including the people who were involved, firsthand accounts from the people involved, that this was really just about support for Israel. And so I think these conversations need to be had. And I have decided that I am willing to stick my neck out, even though it may cost me a lot. You know, this is called costly signaling. You know, this is a topic that you don't get a lot of applause for bringing up. And in the circles I run in, there is the threat of cancellation on all sides. There's the threat of cancellation on vaguely right-wing people that I'm associated with, as well as vaguely left-wing people that I'm associated with. And so I don't really think that this doesn't get me very much in worldly means, in my experience at least. But what it gets me is I feel closer to honesty and authenticity and truth. And I feel like as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, like that's really all that I have. And I feel like we are at a massive turning point for humanity. And it's likely going to either become increasingly, astonishingly amazing, like the Tesla rocket launch the rocket catch that just occurred at the time of this recording, or it's going to get very, very dark. And either way, it's important for my self-respect that I speak up about these topics, because I think that they're really important. And I think that what I'm doing, I think it will age very well. That's what I think. And also, last but I would be remiss not to mention that I feel that it's incumbent upon people of an ethnicity who see problematic possibilities within their own ethnicity to speak on these things. And so because I'm Jewish, I feel that it's my responsibility to be a person who talks about these issues, because I do see patterns that others see who aren't Jews, and I am a Jew, and so it's not as easy to cancel me as an anti-Semite, because that would be canceling myself. And so the world that I want, to be very clear, is a world of beauty where there is broad human flourishing across all continents to the greatest extent possible. That is the world as I envision it. So I do not wish harm or ill will upon any groups of people whatsoever. If there is something called the Illuminati, or something, whether it's the deep state or something like that, I'm not so sure. I have the fondest feelings toward them, but toward the broad sector of humanity, I feel like we have the possibility to be entering a golden age, and I think that there are very few things holding us back, and losing free speech on the internet could be one of them. And all signs to me point to the fact that the way we will lose this is through hate speech laws involving anti-Semitism is the first issue. And so thus I speak up. and thus spake Zarathustra or something. That was a really terrible ending, but you know, it is what it is. So if you like this video and there's a part that you think would be good to be clipped, it would mean a lot to me if you reply with a timestamp of that, of what you think should be clipped, so I can add it to a short form video to TikTok and things of that nature. So anyway, you know what to do. Go fuck yourself. Peace.
Otis5D.xyz.
Go fuck your